All right, I'm gonna take you behind the scenes of a 150K a month paid ads agency. Let me tell you, this is a top tier agency because they're doing consistent 40 to 50% net margins before owner pay. And that is real net margin. Actually cash collected money that hits your bank account, not excluding anything. So I'm gonna tell you exactly where they're currently spending their money. I'm going to tell you the pros and cons of this model, and I tell you what you can take away from this to either improve your margins, or if you are already hitting this, then how you can keep it like that at scale. So let's dive in. First, where the money goes. So this agency is very much delivery focused. So of that 150K, they got just over 60K going to delivery costs, just under 17K going to operating costs, which leaves the 73K in operating profit. And again, these are real numbers, actually what is hitting the bank account. That of that 73K, we got just over 20K being set aside for the tax reserve. We got 15K going to investments, 15K going to owner drawings, and then there's a 22K buffer that we let build up in the bank account for when there's any bigger investments that come up that we can act on. Now, let's take a look what this actually is broken down into. For this agency, delivery cost is their main cost. For them, it is pretty much all going to media buyers. So in their structure, their media buyers are much more senior and actually able to really handle the full account, from both the actual media buying to also a lot of the strategy and account management. So it's a different structure to certain agencies who have very much like a split focus, where the media buyers are often more junior, which then have like all an account manager and strategist together. In here, it works brilliantly to have just the media buyers, especially because their client base are often like smaller SMBs, a lot more local businesses as well, which don't really require a very elaborate strategy. So it works great for them to have their media buyers, still have one account manager to kind of oversee everything and jump in when needed. And maybe have like some overseas designers and sometimes some contractors that get paid a couple thousand a month, but that's always like very small. And so that actually puts that gross margin around 60%, which is fairly consistent every month. In my opinion, this is actually on the lower end. So these guys can probably even make more money, as our typical target for your gross margin is 70%. But as we will see, because their operating costs are so small, it makes sense to put more money into the actual delivery so that you need fewer systems and managers to actually oversee this. But that is the segue to the operating cost, because this is exactly where their spend goes. So at 150K revenue, we just have 17K in operating costs, which is low, but it is enough to run this business. So let me tell you where this goes. Most of it is going to payment fees, around 3%, which is a tough one. Then also software is a larger one at 4K. Financial services, think the bookkeeping, accounting, and a lighter CFO service goes for 2.3K. They got virtual assistants, still helping with a lot of the things, even doing some of the sales and the follow-ups, and the lead generators is done by them. Then they got some payments to referral partners, a very light marketing budget, and then some insurance costs. Now, in some months, they spend a little bit more, in other months, a little bit less, but this is pretty much the average over like the last couple months. And so this is pretty much the full reflection of what you see in this business. Now, then that leaves at 70K profit. In their case, every month, some money is set aside for the taxes. They're US based, so unfortunately that needs to happen. There's always a good amount that's put into the buffer that stays just in the business account, which we can start earning interest on as well. And that is just there in case we do want to make a bigger investment, that we have the money there. And also on the personal side, is putting a lot of money into the investment account. We want to put at least 15K a month in there. And then we just have the living cost, also 15K a month. That is just the free to spend money. A lot of these allocations will scale up as he starts to grow more, but it is always important to hit these 4 buckets. So this is a very good way to think about the profit that you have in the business. You'll just make everything a whole lot simpler if you have like these defined capital allocation rules of where that money should go, so that you avoid, months where you're not taking out enough money, or months where you're just suddenly draining the business account. That is how he's treating the money. Then 2 things that are worth pointing out, because this may look like the perfect business, but if something is too good to be true, it usually is. And so, of course, there is a cost to being at near 50% margin. And that is that in this case, we still have two functions that are underinvested compared to most agencies, and that is sales and operations. Now, in this case, the founder is still doing sales themselves, and lead gen is also more limited to a single channel that is still working well, but more based on the actual founder, and so it's hard to scale. So that is why profits can still look very high, but if you had to take a closer and SDR, different type of marketing investments into this picture, the margin may all of a sudden already drop to 30%. Then the second point is around operations. As we saw, there's no team involved on the operational side. Eventually, more like as you scale to the 250K a month and onwards, you will find that the team is getting so big that you likely need to have a manager either of the team or more of an operations manager who's just there to deal with a lot of the issues. Because right now, a lot of these operational points still fall on the founder who needs to fix it himself. So that is where a 50% margin may hide, a lot of time that is put in by the founder. And so what we will likely see in this agency is that, as I said, 10 to 15% of the margin will go to sales as we start to make those investments, and also 5 to 15K will likely go to the operational side in the near future, which can all of a sudden turn a 50% margin in like a 25% margin if you're not careful. Now, as these investments are being made, one thing that is still interesting in this business, which you may have noticed, was that the gross margin was only at 60%. Now, for most agencies, this can definitely go to 70%, especially as AI is coming out, which will give the actual delivery team more capacity to take on more clients. That will help you raise your gross profit, or potentially by raising the prices over time, either like through AI, by doing a better job of delivering more work for the same with the same people, that will let you raise your prices. So that's the main lever to go to 70%, which can keep this agency at least at 40% plus margins, even as they go to 250, maybe even 500K a month. So very, very healthy agency. And I have 3 takeaways for you here. Number 1, you gotta make sure that you know your numbers like this. I see so many agencies, any business for that matter, who are just operating based on like a back of the napkin model. They may be tracking just their cost kind of loosely in a spreadsheet, and then they tell themselves, oh yeah, I'm hitting 50% margins. But then once you actually look at the transactions, in 8 out of 10 cases, there's thousands that is not being tracked. Payment fees is such a common one that people just ignore. Whereas we saw here, that's like nearly $5,000. There's refunds, chargebacks, one-off coaches, different investments that actually happen. It's money that leaves your bank account that is not being tracked. So if you don't know your numbers like this, make sure you start there, because if you have a skewed picture of where you're actually at, you'll never improve this the right way. Then also, point number 2, don't try and copy this business tomorrow. If you have a structure where you have media buyers, strategists, and account managers all split out, don't fire your account manager and strategist tomorrow and have your media buyer do everything. Every model has pros and cons. We have different clients, high ticket, low ticket, small team, US based team, that can all either do very well or do very poorly. So it has nothing to do with this specific structure or one part of the agency. The only way agencies truly scale and break through is if everything is aligned. So your pricing needs to match the type of team members you have, needs to match the service that you can deliver, needs to match the marketing that you do. So if any of the big points are misaligned, that is when you get issues. That's when your margin starts to get hurt. So don't just try and copy this. Look at your own numbers from point 1, see where your bottlenecks are, where you're spending a lot more than you think you should, and then start there. Because that's point 3, costs are the one thing that can be controlled. Churn is not always in your control. Pricing is not always in your control. But what you are spending, that is purely in your control. And so don't accept if you have a misalignment in your cost structure or in your business model, because that is something you can fix. So there you have it. Full breakdown of a 150K a month agency. If you have any questions on this, you can just reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to chat or share some more information. And of course, if you want any help with figuring out your numbers, tracking everything better, and looking at the strategy of your agency, then just book a call with me, so we can do all the stuff that you currently hate: the bookkeeping, the tracking, even paying your team members, invoicing your clients. And we also do the stuff that you're likely not doing yet: the strategy, the client profitability analysis, the capacity tracking, all the stuff that you actually need to know in order to get to the highest level. So I hope you like this video. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.